honest, are you there?
Absolutely.
Yes.
That's what it's all about.
Okay. Our third event today is basically the title of the session is Global Warming and the Communities of Faith. I think prophetic appeal. I think quite an interesting topic. Our speaker is Father Paul Mayer, who is co-founder of Climate Change Crisis Coalition. And so it's kind of quite an interesting view on and sort of interface with the climate change world. It's something that's kind of coming. I think we're more aware of faith communities getting involved in this issue. Father Paul.
Thank you. Dear friends, first of all, we're to be commended for our perseverance and hanging in there in such intensive discussions. And just as a short preface, shortly before this Copenhagen conference convened, the Secretary General of the UN noted again the vital role of the communities of faith in confronting the challenge of climate change. And I point this out to people who may not think, well, this is really their issue, but just to look at the religious community in a very pragmatic fashion, and to consider the amounts of money, the numbers of educational institutions they control, the number of media outlets. In other words, that they could pragmatically play a very important role in this life or death issue for our beloved Mother Earth. He said that his true name was Uncle, that he was a medicine man from the Inuit people of the Great North. There, he said, the ice was melting. The hunting and the ancient village fishing sites were being destroyed. Even the great polar bears were struggling for survival. Now he had been sent to the south as a messenger and as a healer, as our uncle, and as he said, to melt the ice in the heart of man. This indigenous elder was addressing a religious gathering at the United Nations Earth Summit in Johannesburg in 2002. His simple words sum up the prophetic task of the communities of faith during this critical moment of human and planetary history. Not only are the polar ice caps melting, so are the Siberian permafrost and all the planet's glaciers, from those in the Himalayas, which feed the great rivers of China and the mystical Andes, to the Alps, to the Andes. Even the magnificent and hallowed snows of Mount Kilimanjaro are disappearing. The warming North Sea no longer teems with the sand eel, and the kittiwakes and the puffins and the other seabirds are now unable to feed their young. And as if in tragic silent protest, they are not reproducing anymore and are abandoning their nesting sites for the first time in recorded history. Another spiritual teacher who called himself a geologian, Father Thomas Berry, who was my mentor and died this June at the age of 93, and I recommend him to you in case you don't know about him. I consider him one of the great seminal environmental thinkers of our time. And he said it in one of his wonderful books called The Dream of the Earth. This issue is of a much greater order of magnitude than previous historical crises. For we have changed in a deleterious manner not simply the structure and functioning of human society, we have changed the very chemistry of the planet. We have altered the biosystems. We have changed the topography and even the geological structures of the planet, structures and functions that have taken hundreds of millions and perhaps even billions of years to bring into existence. Such an order of change in its nature and in its order of magnitude has never before entered into Earth history or into human consciousness. Uncle and Father Berry and other spiritual teachers may help us find the words of comfort, transformation, and wisdom that the peoples of the world need to hear at this dangerous moment in human history. This is not just another social issue to be addressed by one more committee, one more website, one more pastoral letter. By the way, these are not put-downs of any of these things. I appreciate the initiative of young people. Perhaps I could say more about that later. One more pastoral letter or one more environmental Sunday. A moderate response will no longer serve to confront a crisis that is anything but moderate. The collapse of the life support systems of the planet demands a response that raises a cry, sounds an alarm, tells unvarnished truths, and makes demand that at first may seem unreasonable. From the religious perspective, this is to assume a prophetic stance. It is inspired by those fierce, often dark-skinned, desert visionaries like Muhammad, Jesus, Jeremiah, and Gandhi, who were often judged to be mad by their critics. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote in The Prophets, a great work, by the way. Rabbi Heschel was one of the first white clergy persons to step out into the public and work with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the civil rights struggle. And he says in this magnificent book, "The prophet is a man who feels fiercely. God has thrust a burden upon his soul, and he is bowed and stunned at man's fierce greed. Frightful is the agony of man. No human voice can convey its full terror. Prophecy is the voice that God has lent to this silent agony, a voice to the plundered poor, to the profaned riches of the world. It is a form of living, a crossing point of God and man. God is raging in the prophet's words." The end of the quotation. It is rapidly becoming apparent that the issue of climate change overshadows all the other great problems facing humanity: war and peace, poverty, hunger, disease. In fact, it is inextricably intertwined with all of these, as can be seen, for example, in the mad military scrambling for the diminishing oil supplies of the Middle East. The killer hurricanes fueled by global warming are not only devastating cities, tropical islands, and whole subcontinental areas, but in New Orleans they also revealed, as rarely before, the blatant neglect of the poor and of the communities of color in particular. In fact, the impact of global warming is especially cruel to God's poor. The Earth's most vulnerable human beings are already suffering disproportionately from the scarcity of potable drinking water, from hunger caused by crop disruption and new diseases, all being spawned or exacerbated by global warming. The predicted worldwide phenomenon of the creation of tens of millions of environmental refugees was seen in microcosm in the impact of Katrina on New Orleans' population, especially its poor population.